Hello, this evening I am working on baking some muffins and maybe some brownies. And tomorrow we have about an hour and a half drive to go to Taal Basilica, a very large basilica in Batangas. And I'm baking some snacks for the way, and it occurred to me that I haven't really discussed with any of you the ins and outs of baking in the Philippines. I'm actually working on the video while I'm doing this here. It's fun to bake in a different country. Uh, One thing that's a challenge for Americans is that everything in the Philippines, well, not everything, but for the most part, around the world, once you go out of the United States, you're going to have to deal with the metric system. Okay, and the metric system, it's just different. Okay, the temperatures are very different from Fahrenheit, and the measurements are very different. Fortunately, in the Philippines was part of the U.S. for a long time, and a lot of the traditions still survive here. You can still see a lot of references to feet. For example, at the doctor's office, my children are measured by feet, and also the scales are in kilograms, but also pounds. So you can see how much your child weighs in pounds very easily, and you can see how tall your child's growing in feet and inches immediately. I also noticed at the mall when my child was getting ready to ride the toy train at the mall, the measurement, the height requirement for the kids is in feet. So there's quite a few references to the imperial measurements, and as opposed to the metric. Although I have to tell you, after working in a lab with engineers, the metric system is much, much easier. Baking in the Philippines, one thing I was worried about was yeast. The yeast do not come in these little tin foil packets. Perhaps they do. Perhaps some stores sell it, but I haven't found it. But they don't come in these little individual packets the way they do in the U.S. The way they come is I found them in this fantastic large foil packet that is from France. Now, a lot of the baking supplies that I've found, the better ones, butter in particular, and yeast, are from France. And it's a little bit expensive. I don't have prices. Actually, I should have gotten prices for you, but I don't have that. But you can find it, at least here in Cavite. We're a half hour away, half hour drive from Manila, so maybe that's why other parts of the Philippines might not have it. But at least here in Cavite, I feel sure, in Quezon Province, and farther up in around Angeles City and the old Clark Air Base, and as you go a little ways away from Manila, I feel very sure that you're going to be able to find these supplies. Now, if you go to Bohol and Dumaguete City, I don't know if they're going to be there. But the baking powder, baking soda is the same. Uh, Whenever I try a new flavor of Quaker Oats, pictured here is a tropical nut and fruit Quaker Oats. I thought my wife would like it. She hated it. So whenever I get a rejection like that, I make muffins. Okay, so that's where my muffins come from. I add the oats. Okay, I'll have to put the recipe that I use on here. It's a compilation of different recipes that I found online and just experimentation. Um, I'm not really big on exact measurements, okay? But this recipe calls for 2 eggs, 2/3 cup of brown sugar, 1/2 cup vegetable oil, 1/2 cup milk, 1 cup all-purpose flour, 3/4 cup instant oatmeal, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon baking soda, 1 pinch salt. Now the ratios there are actually a little bit important. You need twice as much baking powder as baking soda, and you need twice as much baking soda as salt. Okay, so it gets divided by half and then half again. Okay, and then when you're mixing it in, I really couldn't figure out a way to hold the camera while I'm baking, so I need an assistant to do that for me to do a baking video. So I'm just gonna narrate to you all, okay? So I separate the baking powder, baking soda, and salt in like different quadrants of the bowl while I'm mixing everything, okay? So they really don't get mixed together until the very end, okay? The oatmeal, I just dump in oatmeal. I really don't measure it. I'm stirring everything together and I add the oatmeal last. One nice thing I've discovered here is there's plenty of dark chocolate chips for chocolate chip cookies. I really like adding those to muffins. So I didn't add those this time, but usually I do. Usually I add that with the oatmeal at the end. So I'm just going to add it based on feel, for when I feel the oatmeal is the right texture. I mean the batter. And what I look for in a good muffin batter is a really thick liquid. So I don't want it dry like a bread. I don't want to be able to handle it like a bread dough. I want it to be a really thick liquid that you pour into the muffin cups. Okay, the butter comes from France. The yeast comes from France. Everything else seems to be pretty much American. The flour and the eggs are local, really, really good quality. The brown sugar is super good quality. You know, one thing I was really stunned by that I had to just pause and enjoy was French toast. When I first got here, my wife was on a French toast kind of phase, and I was making French toast, and I bought some freshly ground cinnamon, which was a little expensive, but it's available here. And eggs are fresh from an egg farm that's right around the corner here, literally. The bread does not have a lot of the preservatives American bread does, so it's a very pure bread, a very close to like a bakery homemade bread. I really enjoy it. I really like that kind of bread. So I'm making French toast with this bread, this local eggs, and freshly ground cinnamon, and milk. Now the milk in boxes here kind of put me off at first, but it's really rich and it's really delicious and it's wonderful for baking. And I added a little bit of it, just a splash, into the egg with the cinnamon before I dip the bread in there, before I fry it for the French toast. My goodness, that French toast was amazing, amazing. The cinnamon here just comes alive in your mouth. Another thing that really shocked me, I had to pause and enjoy, was shrimp. Now, after living in Texas on the Texas coast for 25 years, I kind of got bored with shrimp. You get shrimp all the time with everything there. So I'm not really big on shrimp, but here in the Philippines, the taste of the shrimp is different. It's really different. And after living here in the Philippines for a while, when you go back to Texas and you get shrimp, it tastes like shrimp flavored sponge. It's just missing something that the Philippine shrimp has. Now, I've heard the same thing from people that have been to Vietnam, that Vietnam has really very rich, very high quality shrimp. And it could just be something unique to the waters of the South China Sea. I don't know. But with regard to baking, one important thing to remember about baking is all the places that I've been to, that I've seen, all the ovens that I've seen here in the Philippines have an external gas tank. You don't have neighborhoods hooked up to gas the way you do in the US. So there's separate portable gas tanks, just like you have for your outside gas grill. And that's essentially what you have. What the oven is like an oven connected to a gas tank, like for your gas grill. Now, I've been shocked at seeing videos online of expats that live in places that are showing off their place, and the gas tank is indoors. That's shocking to me, and that's frightening. And you need to always move the gas tank outdoors. The gas always needs to be outside. And you always need to check all the fittings with a soapy sponge. Just go over it and see if the bubbles are coming up, if there's any kind of slight leak of gas. And you can do that when you're checking the house. Just have them turn on the gas and check leaks. Just check with a soapy sponge, or when you first move in. You know, always shut off the gas when you're not using the stove. Always shut off the gas tank and turn the gas tank on, of course, before you light it. You're not going to have a gas stove here with the pilot lights that are lit all the time, ready to go. It's not safe, and it's not a good idea in any earthquake zone. And I learned that from people in San Francisco that taught me that they shut their gas off routinely because it's an earthquake zone, and that's something that they were trained to do. So I just do that anyways, and I was delighted to see that my wife's family is in the habit of doing that. I didn't have to teach anybody to do that. But that's something you really need to do when you come to the Philippines if you're getting a house or an apartment with an oven because you're planning on baking. Make sure the fittings are well connected, and make sure that you shut off the gas every time you're done. Okay, when you run out of gas, your apartment manager or the property owner will give you the phone number of the local gas company. And this is going to be a kid that he might seem like he's 14 years old. He's going to drive up in a motorcycle with all these gas tanks, and he's going to swap out your tank, and he's going to come about 6 minutes after you call. So make sure when you call to get a new tank of gas, you've got some pants on, okay? Because he's going to be there very quickly. Johnny on the spot. And he knows that if he doesn't provide good service, you're going to go to somewhere else, because every block, it seems like, has a gas distributor. A lot of people use gas here. That's really all I can say. Just the measurements are going to be a little bit off. I brought my own measuring cup. The temperature, I always have a separate thermometer that I put in the oven. I never trust the stove settings, the oven settings for temperature. Never trust that. I learned that from working at fire stations in the U.S. Just always take a thermometer with you. And sometimes it's good to take two because if you're cooking on different shelves, the temperature can stratify in an oven. So it's a good idea just to make sure your thermometer is accurate, to have a second one you can check it with. Okay. Thermometers are good to have in the Philippines anyway. It's good to have a good thermometer, especially an oven thermometer. You can check the thermometer, you can check the refrigerator, make sure it's working. You can stick the thermometer in your air conditioning vent and make sure that that's working properly. It's just a good idea to have a good thermometer in the Philippines. Not so good to keep an eye on the external air temperature and the humidity, because the temperature and humidity might make you tired prematurely before you actually get outside. So I pretty much ignore that. Okay, well, that's what I've learned about baking in the Philippines. Don't be afraid of the milk. Don't be afraid of the eggs. Fantastic quality eggs here. Fantastic quality milk here. Fantastic quality butter here, but it's imported from France. It's there's really good butter from New Zealand. I just get the imported stuff. They've got brie and camembert cheese here. They've got a lot of really good cheese from Denmark. There's a lot of good stuff here. I lived on the Mexican border for a long time, as I said, 25 years. in Texas, and so I used to shop at the Soriana in Mexico quite a bit. And Mexico has the similar stuff. Mexico, you can buy butter from Denmark, I think, and they had Danish ham also in Mexico. That was fantastic. And the baked goods in Mexico, if you go to Mexico, the bakeries are super delicious there. And my father, who was a professional baker for many years, he inherited the bakery, the family bakery, from his father. So I'm a third generation baker, although I've never done it professionally. But my father tasted these Mexican breads and looked at me and said, they're using lard. And that's exactly it. That's the secret in Mexico. They don't use butter, they use pork fat called manteca. You can buy it by the tub in Mexico. Manteca lard. Amazing. It makes amazingly good breads. But they have an expression for that here in the Philippines. It's called forever young. So if you eat that stuff, it's going to keep you forever young. And the joke is forever young means that you're going to die at a young age, and you'll be forever at that age. So be careful about that stuff, okay? They don't do that here in the Philippines that I've seen. They don't use pork fat in baked goods. They use butter. And the butter is imported, and the butter is fantastic. It's a little expensive, but you can definitely do worse. Always soak your yeast in some warm water and a little bit of sugar. I really don't use much sugar when I'm cooking. They've got fantastic brown sugar here, but the white sugar I just keep from the little sugar packets they give me at the McDonald's and Jollibee drive-thru when I buy coffee, because McDonald's here has fantastic coffee, and they always give me sugar packets, and I never use it because I like black coffee. And so I always save the sugar packets, and that's what I use in my baking, especially to activate the yeast. I didn't use yeast in these muffins. I just included the picture so you can see what the yeast looks like here. Fantastic stuff. Baking's a real adventure. Anytime you go abroad outside the U.S., you're going to have an adventure. But don't be afraid to bake. Just remember to always shut off the gas. Always check for leaks. If the gas tank is running low, the gas flame is going to go out. Okay, so you always need to stay in the room and check the progress of what you're baking, and make sure the gas flame doesn't go out and you're not just venting gas into the house. So you have to keep checking that. That's happened to me several times, actually. The gas goes out, and then of course you could relight it. Just shut everything off and then turn it on and relight it. And you've got to shut everything off and vent it out for a little bit first to make sure it doesn't explode. And I've had that happen also, a flash trying to relight the oven, and it singed the hairs on my hand and gave a nasty odor to the kitchen. And it really made my wife's niece crack up. She just thought that was the funniest thing she'd seen in a while. So that's my experience baking in the Philippines. I hope you enjoyed it. And until next time, I'll try and get some baking videos up here. I'll talk to you all later. Take care.